Honorable Justice Venkatachalaya, distinguished panel, distinguished audience, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be invited to this function in a very intellectual, cerebral city of Bangalore and share my views with very sensitive and perceptive persons. I also like the topic electoral reform and constitutional ideals. We have been talking about constitutional reform, but constitutional ideals is a very interesting addition to the subject. And yesterday I was just refreshing my memory about the constitutional ideals, and some very obvious things came up. One, of course, one ideal is that we have a democracy, which is government of the people, for the people, by the people, and election is at the core of it. Second principle is equality. All citizens are equal, whosoever, irrespective of caste, community, gender, whatever. And there is no question of any discrimination. It has to be inclusive. And secularism is one ideal. And our election laws are absolutely in consonance with that. We cannot, candidates cannot make any appeal to voters in the name of religion. They cannot campaign from any religious place. Now, pluralism, inclusion of all communities, castes, languages, regions is a basic feature of India's constitution and therefore of the electoral system. Liberty, freedom of expression. Election is nothing but exercise of freedom of expression. It is an expression of people's opinion about the candidates and the government they're going to form. Then freedom of movement, free and fair elections are central to the concept of liberty. Then the concept of separation of powers also fits in here, because Election Commission, although an organ of the government, when we talk of separation of powers, we only see the three main segments of the government, executive, judiciary, and the legislature. But the other bodies also have some independence and autonomy. An election commission is one such institution. Well, nobody can interfere, not the executive, not the parliament, when the process is in motion. And in fact, Constitution is specifically debarred. There is an article 329, which says even the courts cannot interfere when the election process has been set in motion. And when is the election process set in motion? When the Election Commission announces the election dates and schedule. From that moment, Model Code comes in. This article was challenged in the Supreme Court in the very first year, 1952, 51 or 52. And Supreme Court came out with a very, very clear judgment that the article is so clear and so specific that it debars anybody, including us, the Supreme Court. That is what the Supreme Court said. And that has kept the election uninterrupted, because, it was very common for any lower court to issue a stay order. Electoral rules are not perfect, postpone the election. This is the problem, postpone the election. So elections could never happen. But framers of the Constitution, I think, were the most far-sighted people, and they anticipated all the problems, and they had the answer to this. And this separation, a complete separation, is a testimony of their wisdom. Then federalism is the basic feature of our Constitution. And I would like to point out to our Honorable Chairman. Sir, I would like to mention one aspect of electoral system, that when Constituent Assembly was discussing our institutions, and particularly the Election Commission, there was a great debate whether the state level elections should be held by a state level election commission or the federal commission. Now, normally, logically, all state activities should be conducted at the state level, but they made an exception. This, which is a departure from federalism. This is a violation of the principle of federalism, that they say that if we leave it to the state, electoral roll will never be perfect. And no state will allow outsiders to get enrolled. Then the situation would have been Karnataka only for Kannadigas, and Bengal for Bengalis, and Tamil for Tamilians. Outsiders would not have been enrolled. They anticipated that, and this is the kind of problem we face every day, particularly in Northeast, in Assam, in Manipur, Nagaland, all those places. You know, how come these people have come from outside, or even in Delhi, the Bangladeshis. So outsider concept was visualized by them, and they said, although this is against the principle of federalism, but a central election commission will conduct the state elections. I think this was one of the most wonderful things which they realized. Now I'm going to talk to you about some of the electoral reform. First of all, you know, some highlights of India's electoral system. We have delivered all elections on the dot. Not one election in the entire 67 years of history has been delayed on our account. In a couple of cases, like in Punjab, when there was emergency, when there was president rule for a long time, for about 10 years. In Kashmir, there was a prolonged period, but that is because of the imposition of national emergency by Parliament. Nothing to do with us. But otherwise, whatever it takes, whatever may be the situation, we have conducted the election, and which is what led to smooth transition of power. You know, you can't imagine, these are things we take for granted in India because we have lived with them, but in many African countries, post-election violence is a reality. You know, the cities burn, they dispute the election, they challenge the election commission and doubt its fairness. Now, periodic elections are a lifeline of democracy, and we have conducted election at the regular intervals as prescribed. I wish there was a PowerPoint presentation arrangement available, because I would have shown you some newspaper headlines. You know, for instance, after the 2009 general election, the wonder that is India's election. Well done, EC. Thank you, EC. EC did a great job. Now, these are the headlines which we get after every election. In fact, actually, a good election is no longer news. A bad election will be. Our standards are so high. For us, we are sitting in a college, 60% is you get first division, 75% you get distinction. For us, 99.9% good election is a bad election. It has to be 100% good to the last person. Which is, and it is not just for effect. For instance, there was a case when I was in the election commission. There was a leader from Rajasthan. He was the president of the state Congress party, Mr. C.P. Joshi. He would have been the chief minister if he had won the election. He lost by 1 vote. Now every vote counts. Yes. And when he was, thank you, Justice Venkat Chalaya, for reminding. You know, he lost by 1 vote. When he was losing, he called up the returning officer requesting that, can you recount the postal ballots? Again, there may be human error because they have to be physically counted. There were 550 of them. He says, yes, sir, we will do. In 15-20 minutes, he recounted, same result. He rang up a second time. He said, can you retabulate the totals from each machine? Because that is also done physically. Maybe there is an error. All right. Another 15-20 minutes, same result. His third phone call was to thank him for accommodating all his requests and conducting a fair election. If he lost by 1 vote, this is his luck. I heard that his wife had not voted. So I got very curious and I called him up. I said, Mr. Joshi, this is what we hear. Is that correct? He said, it is true. Actually, that day my wife and daughter had gone to a temple. Now, for us, there are 3 lessons here. One, that every vote counts. Second, you can't take even your family for granted. Third, on the day of poll, the most important temple is the polling station. Now, that's the lesson which we have learned for all time. Now, which is why, while our last election was the biggest in history, 834 million voters, we have a polling booth for a single voter. It's in Gujarat, Gir forest of Gujarat, which is famous for Asiatic lions. A polling party of 6, because that is the normal configuration, goes there previous evening, sets up the booth in a broken forest department dilapidated building, and the party waits for him to come to vote any time of his choice. And even after he had voted, we cannot pack up and go. Because theoretically somebody may come later and challenge his vote that that was a bogus voter. Actually, I'm the voter. So there will be a dispute, and for that dispute we make a provision because it has to be dealt with legally. So we keep the polling station open till 5 o'clock. So this is the beauty of India democracy, the inclusiveness which I mentioned when I was discussing the constitutional values. Everyone has to be included. We have a polling station which is 1,200 kilometers from Chennai, from the Indian mainland, and just about 200 kilometers from Indonesia, Karnataka island. There also we have to deliver as good an election as in Bangalore. No question about that. In deep forest, in mountains, where it takes 3 or 4 days of walk for the polling party to reach. So, but we have to conduct election everywhere. Now, we often hear India is one of the largest democracies. Now, there cannot be a bigger understatement. We are one of the largest, means there are many large democracies and we are also one of them. We are the largest by miles. The second largest is USA, is 1/4 of us. In fact, we have more voters than all 50 countries of Europe put together, or 54 countries of Africa put together, or North and South America, 2 continents put together, or the entire Commonwealth. Actually, we are 90 countries rolled into one. And not just in terms of numbers, but the complexities. Any problem in any of these 90 countries of terrorism, militancy, tribal warfare, this, that or the other, we have it aplenty somewhere or the other. And we deal with them normally and we conduct a good election. After the 2009 election, because that is when I was in the election, a New York Times had given one paragraph on Indian election which summed up 3,000 years of India's history. But one line, it is truly the greatest show on earth, an ode to a diverse and democratic ethos, an inspiration to all the world. And now, EC, Election Commission of India, is perhaps the most powerful election commission in the world. Now, what makes it so powerful? The 6 pillars. One, of course, the Constitution. The election, it's a small fact or factoid, you may call it. Election Commission of India was born a day before India was born as a republic. Not on 26th of January to 1950, but on 25th of January. These 6 articles which created the Election Commission of India and the procedure, those 6 articles were promulgated 2 months before the promulgation of the main constitution. Constitution came on 26 January 1950. These 6 provisions came on 26 November 1949. That was the emphasis on the election. In fact, I'm just reading a book by an Israeli lady who was traced the origin of India's democracy. In fact, Constituent Assembly Secretariat itself had, before the Constitution was even considered, Constituent Assembly Secretariat started working on the electoral roll and laying the infrastructure. Then, under the Constitution, Parliament passes its Act, Representation of People Act 1950, which deals with the electoral roll. An act of the same name, I don't know why we have 2 acts of the same name, it doesn't happen. Representation for People Act 1951, which is about the rest of the election process. And everything which Parliament has done is also to strengthen Election Commission's autonomy and independence. Then the judicial pronouncement. I never tire of saying that judiciary has been the guardian angel of our democracy and of the Election Commission. The kind of judgment which have come from them, as I mentioned, the very first judgment that don't interfere, telling itself, the Supreme Court, that you will not interfere if the process of election is on. So, and after that, our control over bureaucracy, the acceptance of the Model Code of Conduct. Now, Model Code of Conduct is not a law. But the Supreme Court had said that it has to be enforced from the day, from the minute model code in the election is announced, and it has to be enforced very strictly. In a way, sir, technically there are lots of judicial people here, but it has given us power of to legislate. Now, model code is not a law, but because of the Supreme Court judgment, it carries the force of law. It has to be enforced, and there is a punishment. So, the recognition of our power is a very significant judicial pronouncement. There was a time when we could not transfer a collector or SP, but the Supreme Court said no. We could not, when we demanded just one company of 100 people from MHA in 1944, for 94, 95, they refused. Supreme Court said nothing doing, election is the first charge on India's security. If they want any number of companies, you have to give them the force. Whatever staff they want, they have to give. And once the staff is on election duty, it will be deemed to be on deputation with the Election Commission. With the result that we can transfer a Chief Secretary, Home Secretary, DGP. In one case in UP, we transferred all three together. Not because we are trigger happy, not because we enjoy exercising this power, because the opposition parties came to us with evidence that these guys were not neutral. One Chief Secretary said that this is the best Chief Minister I have seen. Now, how will he conduct a free and fair election? So we said, if you like the Chief Minister so much, then out you go, then go and serve him. We don't need you, we'll appoint another Chief Secretary. And so on. Sometimes we get a report, the police commissioner of some place at Madurai at 12 o'clock, midnight, the money is being distributed and he is not taking action. Election is tomorrow morning. So we have transferred him at midnight. Within half an hour, the new CPT takes over. All this power thanks to the Supreme Court. Otherwise, we could not have conducted free and fair election, bloodless election that we have been doing. Then executive orders of the government, the ministry can issue some order like limit which an MLA or MP can money that can be spent by these candidates, 28 lakhs for Vidhan Sabha or 70 lakhs for Lok Sabha, that is fixed by the government of on our recommendation, of course. Then orders of the Election Commission itself, and there are plenty, because my own belief is the election, in fact there is a judgment which perhaps will come in my presentation and I'll read out to you, that we have an omnibus power when there is an unforeseen situation. When there is no law, we decide what we decide, and Supreme Court had made a very beautiful judgment, has clarified that. So we have, for instance, these days there is a debate going on about totalizer. Totalizer is nothing but an electronic device to mix the votes from 10 machines, 10 or 12 machines. It is nothing but a replacement of physical mixing of ballot papers which we used to do. We used to get 10 boxes randomly, empty those ballot papers into a drum, roll the drum and make packets of 50 so that the voting pattern of a village cannot be identified. If a village has not voted for a party which comes to power, the village will be punished for the next 5 years. And there are, we saw on television in Maharashtra somewhere that you did not vote for us, you will be starved of water for the next 5 years. If you don't vote for us, you will get nothing. As if it is, political party, it is their father's property which they are distributing. Now we need to do something about it. A committee of ministers said, no, if we do this anonymity, it will be very bad for democracy. Totally no good reason. Spurious logic. It is nothing but an electronic substitution of the mixing that we used to do already. The logic for mixing which existed then for years and years extends now. Our mistake was, sir, that at that time, whosoever was the CEC referred it to the law ministry. Never refer the things which you can do yourself, take the action. And if it is illegal, it will be challenged, and then we will see. But my own experience is that if it is challenged by the government or anybody, the Supreme Court has come to our rescue in each and every case. It was a mistake. They should not have referred it to them. And I'm reminded of a joke which I have had many years ago, and just now I was reminded when there was a lane when we said no entry, one way. That somebody asked the constable that can I go into this lane? He said, no, you can't. Can't you see there is a sign? He said, but there are 5 other cars going. He said, they never asked me. So if you ask, he will stop you. If you don't ask, keep going. So therefore, if you ask the law ministry, nothing will happen. Best is to do things. If of course it is not in violation of any law. Then local innovation. All the time our young people are reforming. Our system is reforming. One of the secrets of our success, we never think we have arrived, we know everything. We are always learning. Always learning. From small young officers, junior officials, something happening. Just to give an example, on the border of China in Arunachal Pradesh, the booth which takes 3 days to reach. Now, if there is booth capturing, we will not get to know till the result is out. And once the result is out, our hands are cut because the power moves to the High Court. Because then you can only challenge the result in in an election petition. Therefore, we must know before we announce the result. So one lady collector said, sir, in 5 such villages, I have put up my laptop with a camera, cheap camera, and I'll be live webcasting from those polling booths. And this is the contact number. Please see when you're sitting in office in Delhi. I saw those 5 booths, whatever was happening on the Chinese border, which are difficult to reach. In one case, I saw one police constable in uniform entering the booth. Now, police is not allowed inside the booth. What was he doing? We got to know sitting in Delhi. Immediately, we called and found out that there was no mischief intended. It was just a foolish entry. But the fact that we got to know, now this was an innovation. We made it an all India scheme. In 10-15% of our polling booths, we have made live webcasting compulsory. Now, judicial support, I was telling you one beautiful judgment of Supreme Court. It is 1978, MS Gill versus another. 1978, sir, who was the Chief Justice in 1978? Now, this is what it reads. Where the existing laws are absent and yet a situation has to be tackled, the Chief Election Commissioner has not to fold his hands in prayer and pray to God for divine inspiration to enable him to exercise his functions and perform his duties, or to look for any external authority for the grant of powers to deal with the situation. His powers independently in all matters relating to the conduct of elections and see that the election process is completed properly in a free and fair manner. So don't look for divine guidance, or don't look for law ministry or anybody. Exercise, use your mind, go ahead and do it, and then if it is challenged, if it is bona fide, you will surely get support from the Supreme Court. Now also there were 2-3 highlights, and then I come to some concerns that we have. We give universal voting rights from day one. There are some ladies sitting here, which means that men and women were given equal rights from day one. Now, you might say, what is the big deal? Actually, it is a big deal. USA, the greatest democracy in the world, took 144 years to give equal voting rights to women. UK, the mother of modern democracies, took 100 years to give this vote right. Here was this very poor country with 84% illiteracy, extreme poverty, socially divided, just suffering the consequences of partition, ruled by 565 princely states, and this country, which are very unviable as it seemed at that time, which opted for giving equal voting rights to women. The Western world was very aghast, they were surprised. They thought we have gone mad. Yeah, democracy चलाएंगे with 84% illiterate people, सबको power दे दी. Everybody over 21 years at that time, later 18. So, but we proved everybody wrong. The very first election of 1951-52 by Mr. Sukumar Sen, with no infrastructure, no previous experience, was one of the wonders of democracy worldwide. And we know Mr. T.N. Session, but Mr. Sukumar Sen deserves perhaps even a lot more applause. Now, as I mentioned, model code of conduct is one of the features of India's electoral system, which is, although we always condemn political parties, but one good thing they have done, at least the political parties of those days, that they created this model code of conduct, which is a code of self-discipline. We won't disturb each other's meetings. We will not indulge in hate speech, no personal attack. We'll keep the campaign dignified. All this, not a law of the land, but the compliance with the model code is much more true than any law. Just a notice, even the fear of a notice gives them shivers. And when the notice for violation of the model code goes, although after the model code, the only punishment we can give is warning and censure or reprimand, that's all. For which people think we are toothless. We would have heard so much of criticism, Election Commission is useless, toothless. After the model code violation, all they did was just warn him, because that is all we can do. It is not a law. But the moral authority of that notice should not be underestimated. A notice to Chief Minister of Karnataka, for instance, will be headline for the next 2-3 days. And his reply to us, and what is the notice like? Mr. So-and-so, you are reported to have violated this code. Please answer by tomorrow 5 o'clock why action should not be taken against you. By 4 o'clock, the reply comes. This doesn't happen in an FIR, and I can dare say, sir, it doesn't happen in any judicial case with that kind of promptitude, because that is the kind of moral authority and the fear which is exercised. People don't fully appreciate that. Let me also make it clear that besides the model code, we also file an FIR under an appropriate law. But since the FIR result will be visible after 7 or 10 years, or when the judgment comes, if it does, so, but our action is instant. Then we have improved the process from the beginning. Initially, if it was a ballot box, which was given a color, red box, yellow box, blue box, it was very easy that you vote for me, my box is red, please put. Then we discovered that already before the polling started, some ballot papers were already inside. So cheating started as early as that. So it was changed to a common ballot paper where you have to indicate your preference on a common ballot paper. It started in 62. Then later on in 82, we introduced the electronic voting machine, which Supreme Court declared illegal for a good technical means legal reason. They said that your law mentions ballot paper, it doesn't mention a machine. So an election in Kerala was declared illegal, it had to be repeated. Then we had to amend the law, and since 1998 we have been using the machine, which we consider a wonder machine of democracy. Every election, we have improved the machine gradually, and now the latest improvement is VVPAT, Voter Verifiable Paper Audit Trail. So that a trail and evidence is left, a slip is generated for the voter, for the candidate you chose, and it will go into a sealed box. In case of dispute, or even just to cross-check, it has to tally, and they are all tallying, the system is working pretty fine. Then we introduced voter awareness. Well, since it was mentioned in my biodata that my PhD is in communication and social marketing. When I joined the Election Commission, within a week I discovered that turnout was very low. About 20%, 24% in many places, particularly so-called educated urban people. They were the big defaulters. I said we should educate the voters, and I was outvoted within my organization by my seniors. Do it in your time. Teaching, educating voters is not your job. Your job is to conduct and manage elections. I said, no, it is very much our job, because the legitimacy of the legislator comes into play. If only 20% turnout happens, and that 20% vote is divided over 15 candidates, you win with 15%. 85% of your constituency has not voted for you, but you still have been declared a winner. So the question of legitimacy of the legislator comes into play. And secondly, a very dangerous proposal comes that you should make it compulsory. Voting should be compulsory. And it has come from no less than Mr. Narendra Modi, who was then the Chief Minister, or Mr. Advani, or many leaders across parties. At that time, we said no on our dead body. Democracy, your right to vote includes your right not to vote. After all, in Parliament every day, yes, no, and abstain. Abstain is your right not to vote. So, secondly, if you make it compulsory and you don't vote, you are committing an illegality for which you should be punished. And if that punishment is as little as a fine of 1 rupee, after all, we are a civilized country, that process, that fine of 1 rupee has to come through due process of law. And what is the due process of law? A legal notice will come to you that you, Mr. So-and-so, you have not voted, why action should not be taken from you, and 1 rupee recovered. Now, 1 rupee fine or 1 million rupees, it is a fine, it is a conviction and due process of law. Now, 30 million people did not vote last time, 30 crores, 300 million, 30 crore court cases will be started by us after every election. 3 million pendency is causing sleepless night to the Supreme Court and the government. 3 million over 70 years. Here we will be adding 300 million, 30 crores every time. Then they used to say, Australia, Singapore, वहाँ पे होता है, आप copy करें. I talked to my Australian counterpart, how is it doing there? They say very bad. There is a fine of $20, and to recover those 20, they end up spending $200. And after 3-4 years of litigation. Then I said, after all that, there must be 100% turnout. They said, no, just 90%. And believe me, when I was talking to these gentlemen in Australia, we had had election in Tripura where we had a turnout of 93.4%. I said, look, if we can do with pyar se, if we can do with love and persuasion, why do you need a danda? But I must say, sir, same Mr. Modi, as Prime Minister a year ago in his Mann Ki Baat, he spent 4.5 minutes complimenting the Election Commission, and he says, the body which used to be just a regulatory body using a stick, has now become at the center of the citizen, and is citizen friendly, voter friendly, and it was entirely an appreciation of voter education as against compulsion. So he changed his mind, which is the maturity of a leader and maturity of our democracy. Now, voter awareness has been a turning point, and because we didn't have to ask the law ministry, can we introduce it? We just introduced it. We set up a division, and every election now these are figures which cannot be fudged. Election results. You will find from 2010 Jharkhand election and Bihar election, every election has given highest ever turnout in history. No looking back. Then expenditure monitoring, that was one of the major problems. We set up a new expenditure division, which worked beautifully for some time. And in my book, I have mentioned 40 modus operandi of cheating, which Justice Venkatacharya was showing that he got an extract from my book. And surely they must have discovered many more modus operandi now. This is one area I'm very sorry to admit that where we have not achieved foolproof success, or if I can say that we have failed. We need to do a lot more. What? I really don't know. Then electoral updation, it has been computerized so that we can identify bogus voters. Introduction of photo on the electoral roll is one innovation to prevent impersonation. Booth level officer has been created. You know, how many of you know you are booth level officer? Since in town there is a problem, in villages it is easy because it is probably a school teacher or a patwari who is your booth level officer. You go anytime, ask whether your name is there or not. If not, fill up the form. If there is a mistake, fill up the correction form. And we have taken it to your doorstep. Somebody was telling me, and in fact they will be coming to discuss with me, 18 lakh voters are missing in Bangalore. So they are concerned, and they have not been using the BLO. Then we use technology of the most sophisticated technology across the board, except in EVM, where by a conscious decision we use a 17th century technology of an elementary calculator by choice, although we are an IT superpower. Because it has to be a standalone machine. The telephone in your pocket is a very dangerous device because it is communicating with the outside world. It is taking orders from somewhere. It can even trigger an explosion and bring the hall down. But our machine is standalone. Then, having said all this, well, my last point, there are some issues of concern. One, the money power remains unsolved. Urban apathy of the so-called educated, not only they do not vote, you will notice they are sitting in their drawing rooms condemning the politicians, sab neta chor hai, sab neta chor hai, and I have never voted in my life. Now, if you have never voted in your life, you should be hiding your face instead of bragging it and making it a fashion statement. So through voter education, we have tried to name and shame these guys, and as a result, there has been a substantial change of attitude. Paid news is a major concern, that the media is now paid. They will write editorial, they write news if you paid for it. And how did we discover? Both the candidates bought the package which the newspaper was offering. So on the first page of the same newspaper, A is also winning, B is also winning. They are both winning because they are both paid. Now, how can that be? So that is how we discovered the paid news, and we find it's a very serious phenomenon. Then, so 2-3 reform proposals are which are pending. The most powerful commission in the world has the most defective system of appointment. We are just appointed by the government of the day. I was also beneficiary of that scheme. You might say that you are talking about it now, but no, even as CEC, I'm on record. If you Google, you'll find on YouTube interviews. For Karan Thapar once asked me, you think your system of appointment is good? I said, no, it is very bad. He said, would you have been happier if leader of opposition, Sushma Swaraj at that time, had also signed your appointment? I said, I would have been 1,000 times happy. Because then this is acceptance of your neutrality, then nobody can raise a finger. Now, if you have a collegium for judiciary, you have a collegium for CIC and CVC, which are not even constitutional bodies. You have a collegium for Director CBI, which is not even a body, which is just head of a department of the government. A collegium with Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India for just head of a department. And here is the most important, crucial, critical constitutional body which can make a difference, which can play havoc with India's polity, Election Commission. It is appointed by the government of the day. Now, we have been demanding, my predecessors, me and my successors, they have all been demanding for the last 20-25 years, but the government of the day thinks it is there forever. And why should we give this power? Previous government used to use this power, let us also use this. But somebody has to rise above immediate party interest and think of the national interest. Save this institution. But I am very sure, sir, all the reforms have come through the Supreme Court. This is now before the Supreme Court. This will probably come from the Supreme Court. Now, we have power to register, we don't have power to deregister. This is one judgment, sir, of the Supreme Court we don't really understand. Now, I think there is a common law, there are so many legal luminaries here, which according to which the registering authority or licensing authority has also the power to delicense. So if we register parties, why are we not allowed to deregister? Even when we know that they are bogus, they are just for money laundering, they are all dead, but we cannot do anything. But in any case, the Supreme Court gave this judgment for whatever the good reason, but the proposal is pending with the ministry, with the government for 20 years. Kaan pe junior ringti. Again, probably we'll have to go to the Supreme Court. Kahan gaye Tilochan Shastri? Aapke haath mein. You start the PIL and then this is Venkatachalaya will dispose of it. I think I'll end this. The couple of points which were mentioned by Mr. Bhashan of PR system. In fact, in my book, which I originally wrote in the middle of 2014 election, I discussed all the systems of election, first past the post, which we follow now, and supported it that this is convenient, this is easy, 65 years of history, and PR systems are a little complicated, and I rejected them. But when I wrote the third edition of my book after the 2014 election, I had to change my opinion. based on my experience, our experience. What happened was in UP, a party with the third largest vote share, BSP with 20% vote in UP, got 0 seat from UP. Now 20% voter gets a 0 seat. This is not democracy. This is not representative democracy. Therefore, winner takes all actually is a flawed system, and we borrowed it from the Westminster model, UK model. UK itself has been debating for 15-20 years. 10 years ago, there was a referendum, which of course got defeated because nobody understood what was the question. You know, they put the question foolishly. Very low turnout and in a tight result, it got defeated. Now they are discussing again. I was an observer in the British election for 2015. One party, UKIP, got 13% vote and only 1 seat. And there was such a hue and cry. We had 20% vote and 0 seat, no hue and cry. I think we have to discuss the PR system in Tabasha. I'm glad you're reminded. Simultaneous election and electoral bonds are two things which have been introduced as concept and as a reality by the government. I think I would rather stop, and if there is a question on that, I would rather answer it in a Q&A session. Thank you very much.